In this episode, we shift from responding to security incidents to preparing the business to keep functioning when disruption happens. Because leadership is not only about reacting well, it is about making sure the organization can still deliver what it promises when things go sideways. Business continuity planning, BCP, is the discipline of keeping essential outcomes moving even when systems, people, or facilities are impaired, and it is one of the most practical ways security leadership protects trust. Beginners often picture continuity as a binder on a shelf or a once-a-year drill that everyone forgets. But real continuity is closer to a living agreement between the business and the people who run technology. It answers questions that matter under stress, like what must keep working today, what can pause safely, and what workarounds are acceptable until full restoration occurs. When BCP reflects real dependencies, it prevents preventable chaos because the organization has already decided what matters and how to adapt. The goal is simple to say and hard to achieve. Continue the mission while managing risk and safety. A strong continuity plan starts by treating the business as a set of capabilities, not a set of departments or applications, because applications are rarely the true goal. A capability is something the organization must do, like process payments, deliver a service, support customers, ship products, or make critical decisions, and each capability depends on people, processes, information, and technology working together. Beginners often start continuity planning by listing systems, but that can produce a plan that restores the wrong things first or overlooks hidden dependencies that collapse the real work. Leaders should drive the conversation toward outcomes, asking what the business must deliver in the first hour, the first day, and the first week of disruption. Once those outcomes are clear, you can map the supporting dependencies with honesty. This approach also makes continuity planning more engaging, because business stakeholders care about keeping outcomes alive, not about memorizing server names. When you anchor BCP in capabilities, you can design continuity that matches reality rather than documentation. One of the most valuable concepts in continuity planning is dependency mapping, which means identifying what each critical capability truly relies on, including the dependencies people forget until they break. Dependencies include obvious things like a primary application and its database, but they also include identity systems, network connectivity, third-party services, phones, email, and even simple items like access to customer contact information. Beginners often assume dependencies are linear, like a chain, but in real organizations, dependencies look more like webs, and a web can collapse from a small break in an unexpected place. Leaders should encourage dependency conversations that include operational workarounds, because sometimes a capability can continue with a manual process if certain information is available and certain approvals exist. That is why dependency mapping should include people and processes, not only technology. When you understand the web, you can choose continuity strategies that keep the web from tearing in the first place. The plan becomes a guide for how the business will still function, not just a list of what IT will rebuild. Business impact analysis, BIA, is the structured way organizations decide which capabilities are truly critical and what the consequences are if those capabilities stop, degrade, or produce incorrect results. A BIA is not a paperwork ritual. It is a decision-making tool that turns vague importance into prioritized commitments. Beginners sometimes think everything is critical because every department will argue their work matters. But the point of ABIA is to force trade-offs based on measurable impact, such as revenue loss, safety risk, legal exposure, customer trust, and operational backlog that becomes unmanageable. Leaders should treat ABIA as a facilitated conversation where assumptions are challenged gently but firmly, because people tend to overestimate how long they can operate without their favorite tools and underestimate how quickly small failures can become big. A good BIA also identifies peak periods, because a disruption during a critical business window can multiply harm. When the BIA is done honestly, it becomes the backbone of priorities during crisis, which reduces arguments when time is short. It also helps prevent the classic failure where teams restore what is loudest instead of what is most important. Continuity planning must also reflect that not all disruptions look the same, because the best response to a building problem is different from the best response to a cyber event, and the plan should be flexible enough to handle both. Disruptions can include hardware failures, cloud outages, human unavailability, supplier failures, natural events, and deliberate attacks, and each one changes what is safe and what is possible. Beginners sometimes write a continuity plan as if the only risk is downtime, but many incidents involve loss of integrity, loss of confidentiality, or uncertainty about whether systems can be trusted. That trust issue matters because in some scenarios the right continuity move is not to restore quickly, but to restore carefully to avoid reintroducing compromise. Leaders should ensure BCP includes guidance for operating in degraded trust, such as limiting certain transactions, adding extra approvals, or using alternate verification methods while systems are being validated. This is where security leadership adds unique value, because it recognizes that continuity and security can conflict when the environment is untrusted. A mature plan respects that conflict and provides decision rules rather than leaving teams to improvise. A practical continuity plan distinguishes between continuity strategies that keep a capability running and recovery strategies that rebuild systems, because those are related but not identical. Continuity strategies might include manual processing, alternate locations, alternate communication channels, or temporary service limits that keep essential outcomes moving. Recovery strategies involve restoring technology and data so normal operations return, which often takes longer and requires verification. Beginners often equate continuity with recovery, but the difference matters because the business can sometimes continue in a limited way even while recovery is ongoing. Leaders should make sure stakeholders understand that continuity is about maintaining mission delivery, not about achieving perfect normalcy immediately. This mindset helps avoid pressure that pushes teams into unsafe shortcuts, like restoring a system before it is trustworthy or skipping validation because customers are waiting. Continuity is also about managing expectations, including what service levels will look like during disruption and what customer commitments can be met. When continuity and recovery are separated conceptually, planning becomes clearer and more realistic. Another essential element is identifying single points of failure that are not visible in diagrams, but are obvious when you ask who knows how things actually work. Many dependencies are human, such as one person who knows how to run a critical process, one team that owns a vendor relationship, or one administrator account that everyone relies on. Beginners sometimes focus on redundant servers and forget that a single key person on vacation can be as disruptive as a system outage. Leaders should push for redundancy in knowledge, access, and decision authority, because continuity fails when the organization cannot execute its plan due to missing people or missing permissions. This includes ensuring that emergency contacts are current, that on-call coverage exists, and that access to critical systems can be obtained safely during crisis without creating new security holes. It also includes documenting critical steps in plain language so someone else can follow them under stress. When BCP accounts for human single points of failure, it becomes more resilient and less dependent on heroics. Resilience is about repeatable capability, not about remembering who always saves the day. Third-party and supply chain dependencies deserve special attention because modern businesses often rely on external services for core functions, and a continuity plan that ignores that reality is incomplete. A cloud provider outage, a payment processor disruption, or a vendor security incident can stop your business even when your own systems are healthy. Beginners sometimes treat vendor risk as a separate topic from continuity planning, but in practice, vendor disruption is one of the most common continuity challenges. Leaders should ensure that critical vendors are identified, that contact paths exist, and that alternate procedures are defined when those vendors are unavailable. Alternate procedures might include switching to a backup provider, delaying certain services, or communicating clearly to customers about reduced functionality. Continuity planning should also include understanding what information you need from vendors during incidents, such as status updates and expected restoration timelines. The plan is stronger when it assumes vendors will fail sometimes and explains how the business will respond without panic. This is not distrust, it is realistic risk management. Communication dependencies are also often underestimated, yet they are frequently the first thing teams need when everything else is unstable. If email is down, if chat tools are unavailable, or if internal networks are disrupted, the team still needs a reliable way to coordinate response and communicate with stakeholders. Beginners sometimes assume communication will just work, but disruptions often break the very tools people use to coordinate. Leaders should ensure the continuity plan includes alternate communication methods and clear rules for how they will be used, especially in security-sensitive incidents where confidentiality matters. This might include predefined call trees, out-of-band channels, and a designated place to publish internal status updates. Communication planning should also include what messages go to employees, customers, and partners during different disruption types, because uncertainty can cause rumor and uncoordinated actions. A continuity plan that includes communication is more than a technical plan. It is an organizational plan. When communication holds, coordination holds, and when coordination holds, the business can adapt. Effective BCP also includes realistic decision thresholds, because in a crisis you need to know when to switch from normal operations to continuity mode without debating endlessly. Those thresholds might relate to duration of outage, loss of a facility, loss of a critical system, or evidence that the environment is untrusted due to a security incident. Beginners often leave thresholds vague, which leads to delays and confusion when decisions should be quick. Leaders should push for clear triggers and clear authority, so that someone can declare continuity mode and initiate predefined actions without requiring a committee meeting. This does not mean rigid behavior. It means clear starting points. Once continuity mode is initiated, the plan should define what immediate steps occur, such as notifying key stakeholders, activating alternate workflows, and prioritizing critical capabilities. Clear thresholds reduce emotional decision-making and help the organization move as one. In a crisis, coordinated movement is a competitive advantage because it reduces wasted effort and prevents contradictory actions. Testing and exercising are the difference between a plan that looks good and a plan that works, because continuity is ultimately about execution under stress. Beginners sometimes think testing means running a single drill and checking a box, but effective testing is incremental and varied, including small walkthroughs, scenario discussions, and occasional deeper exercises that reveal hidden dependencies. Leaders should create a culture where exercises are treated as learning opportunities rather than as performance evaluations, because fear of embarrassment causes people to hide gaps. Exercises should test not only technical recovery, but also decision-making, communications, and the ability of business teams to operate with manual or degraded processes. Testing should also verify that contact information, permissions, and access paths are current, because stale details can break a plan instantly. A continuity plan that is not tested tends to fail at the seams, not because people are incompetent, but because the plan assumed the world would cooperate. Testing is how you teach the plan about reality. A continuity plan must also address the tension between speed and trust, especially when the disruption involves suspected compromise rather than simple failure. Restoring service quickly can be the right business move when the problem is a benign outage, but restoring quickly can be dangerous when systems may still be compromised or when data integrity is uncertain. Beginners often treat restoration as the goal in every scenario, but security leadership requires knowing when restoration must include verification and monitoring before you return to full operation. Leaders should ensure the plan describes how the business will operate in limited modes while trust is being rebuilt, such as restricting certain high-risk actions, adding extra approvals, or temporarily pausing sensitive processes. These limits can feel inconvenient, but they can prevent far greater damage from fraud, data corruption, or reinfection. The continuity plan should therefore include not only how to keep operating, but how to operate safely when confidence is low. Safety and trust are continuity outcomes, not optional extras. Documentation and ownership are also central, because continuity planning fails when no one maintains it and no one believes it is their job. A plan should have clear owners for each critical capability, clear owners for supporting systems, and a clear cadence for review and update as the business changes. Beginners sometimes treat continuity as an IT project, but real continuity is a shared responsibility because business processes change, vendors change, staffing changes, and risk changes. Leaders should ensure continuity planning is integrated into change management and program governance, so it evolves with the organization rather than lagging behind it. Documentation should also be written for usability, meaning it can be followed during stress by someone who may not be the original author. If the plan is dense, jargon-heavy, or stored in an inaccessible place, it may as well not exist. Ownership and usability are what make continuity planning operational rather than theoretical. When the plan is activated during a real disruption, success depends on having clear priorities that reflect real dependencies, not wishful thinking. That means the organization knows which capabilities come first, which can degrade temporarily, and which can pause without creating unacceptable harm. It also means teams know what minimum viable operation looks like, what manual workarounds are permitted, and what information must be preserved for later recovery and investigation. Leaders should emphasize that continuity is not about maintaining comfort. It is about maintaining essential outcomes while controlling risk. During activation, the plan should guide decisions about resource allocation, like which teams focus on customer support, which focus on restoring critical systems, and which focus on communicating status. This prevents the common failure where everyone focuses on their own area and the overall business outcome suffers. When BCP reflects real business dependencies, activation feels like executing a play, not inventing a game. By the end of this episode, you should be able to describe business continuity planning, BCP, as a practical leadership tool that aligns people, processes, technology, and decisions so the business can keep delivering essential outcomes during disruption. It starts with understanding capabilities and mapping real dependencies, then uses business impact analysis, BIA, to prioritize based on consequences rather than politics. It accounts for different disruption types, including cases where trust is degraded, and it separates continuity strategies from recovery efforts so the business can operate while restoration continues. It recognizes human and vendor dependencies, protects communication pathways, and defines decision triggers and authority so the organization can shift into continuity mode quickly and coherently. It is tested and maintained so it stays real, and it is written and owned so it can be executed under stress. When these elements are present, continuity becomes a reliable capability that reduces chaos, limits harm, and protects trust, which is exactly what security leadership is supposed to deliver.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.